to another episode of the Infernal Brains podcast. I'm Tars Tarkus from tarstarkus.net.
And I'm Todd Statman from Die Danger, Die Die Kill, aka 40K.
And today we have yet another extra special edition of the Infernal Brains podcast with one of the most probably ridiculous Batman films of all time, in that it is completely unauthorized and yet also surprisingly entertaining. It's James Batman from the wonderful Philippines.
Yeah, I would say that James Batman has actually gotten a lot of attention because for the longest time it was one of the only surviving examples of Filipino pulp cinema. That's changed a little bit in recent times, but as a result of that, it got a lot of write-ups on blogs such as, tarstarkus.net and Die Danger, Die Die Kill and elsewhere. So it's one of the, and also because of the novelty of it being a Filipino film that features Batman and James Bond. So, it has quite a rep on the internets, is what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah, and it's popular enough among the cult circles that someone actually went and bothered to subtitle it. So there's fan stubs out there, which you can easily find if you know how to Google. So we'll let the listener do that.
So everybody but your 80-year-old mom can find it. So. And kudos to whoever subtitled it, because the version that I had, the condition of most surviving old Filipino films tends to be pretty poor.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in terms of film preservation, they probably rank among the worst, which is not their fault. I mean, they're the Philippines. They have other things to worry about than preserving James Batman for the ages. So, and I think also with a lot of these, Thailand is the same thing. I think with a lot of Southeast Asian countries, a lot of it is the climate. Unless you have these films stored in like a refrigerated storage space, they're just the humidity is just, they're gonna rot. So, and I think that's the case with a lot of these films. So the version of James Batman I watched, the soundtrack was barely extant. You could barely hear it for most of the film. So thankfully there were the subtitles, which were extremely helpful. And also I watched it with my Filipino wife, and she translated the parts that were not translated on the subtitles.
Yeah, and even with the degradations, it looks a lot better than a lot of older Filipino films.
Yes.
You go in and they look like they're filmed through a haze of beer, and the audio.
Yes.
Yeah, the audio is even worse than this, where you can't hear anything at all.
Yeah, they look like they've been lying in a sewer for 20 years, pretty much. And you're watching them through it's like hangover vision.
Yeah, it's a miracle they even still exist. So.
It is, so we're lucky to even be able to get to see them in that condition.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And so, James Batman, as we mentioned, features both Batman and James Bond, and they're both played by comedian Dolphy in a dual role, which is also pretty neat how they pull that off.
Yeah. Well, that was sort of his thing. A lot of Dolphy's movies, he plays a dual role. I think that came as a result of, in the 50s, he did a lot of drag roles. He'd play both the female and the male leads in movies. So I think they stuck with that. But it's pretty well done, actually, considering it's kind of a low-budget film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, from rewatching it, it looks like a couple of the scenes they just got a Dolphy hidden in the Batman costume.
Yes.
But then other scenes, they seem to both be out there, and they seem to be sort of advanced with how they can get both of them in the same shot.
Times, so. Yeah. It was kind of like, the Patty Duke show level of, doubling. So you want to talk about Dolphy?
Yes.
He is probably the most beloved comedian in the Philippines, as of the beginning of his career and until his death just a couple years ago. He's a good gauge of how popular he was is that when the Beatles played in the Philippines in 1966, Dolphy was the opening act. So, yeah.
Yeah, and he had a really long career. He started in showbiz, he started performing back when the Japanese were occupying the Philippines.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he was in movies starting at age 19, and he was friends with Fernando Poe Sr.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of films with actually Fernando Poe's son.
Yeah, who's also one of the biggest, Fernando Poe Jr. or FPJ, who's also one of the most beloved figures in Filipino popular cinema.
Yeah.
Fernando Sr. introduced him to the head of Sampaguita Pictures, who was a guy named Dr. Jose Perez. And he became a contract player with Sampaguita in 1952. Sampaguita was actually the last of the big four studios. There had been a sort of a golden age of Filipino cinema in the 50s with four large studios making relatively lavish, star-studded pictures. The industry fell on hard times in the late 50s, and Sampaguita ended up being the last studio standing. So even though James Batman definitely has the look of a low-budget B-movie, it was actually produced by the biggest studio in the Philippines. And they had actually come very close to bankruptcy, but they were saved by having a huge hit with this film called Roberta, which was a melodrama based on a comic by Mars Ravello, who is the creator of Darna. Mm-hmm. And two of the stars of Batman were also in Roberta, Boyolano, who plays Robin, or Ruben, depending on which version you see, and Bella Flores, who plays Delia in James Batman. We're both in Roberta. Trivia. Your next Filipino cinema trivia night. Keep these things in mind.
Yes. And, Dolphy had hundreds of films that he starred in, a huge chunk of which you can't see anymore because they're either degraded to the point where it's not worth it, or they might be stashed away somewhere in horrible condition, or they just might be lost. So.
Or the man doesn't want you to see them.
Yeah.
There's also that. Yeah, and a lot of his like I said, he did a lot of these sort of cross-dressing comedies. And then in the 60s, he started doing a lot of these very broad sort of Mad Magazine-style pop culture parody movies. Yeah. Most of them parodies of Western pop culture, and especially of the James Bond movies. Mm-hmm. We have a few titles we can list, but I imagine that it's probably just the tip of the iceberg. But couple movies that I've reviewed on 40K are Genghis Bond, and the other is Napoleon Doble and the Sexy Six, and then a couple of the other titles are Dr. Yes and Dollfinger.
And there's Operation Butterball.
Yeah?
Yeah. Dolpong Istanbul.
Oh, I know that one.
Doble Solo. And he did, besides the spy films, he had just the general James Bond, or no, general Mad Magazine parody types films. He had his Tarzan character was Tan San. And then there was a movie where Tan San met Tarzan. And he did Pa Siklab Ni Long Ranger. And a Dolpong Hitler, where he was Hitler.
Hilarious.
Yes.
He also did parodies of Filipino pop culture figures. Like there was a Darna movie, I can't remember the name, but a Darna parody where he played Darna. Darna Kuno, and then he also did a Captain Barbell parody, as far as I know. And also, spy spoofs have been a pretty central part of Filipino cinema, aside from one starring Dolphy. There's one called James Bone, which has Polito, who's a sort of skinny James Bond. And then there's, of course, the Agent 00 movie starring Wang Wang, For Your Hide Only and The Impossible Kid, which Andrew Leopold, of course, made an incredible documentary about Wang Wang called The Search for Wang Wang, which everybody should see. And also, there is some serious spy films too, like the series of Tony Falcon, Agent X-44. That was quite a long-running series throughout the 60s into the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And then I think Chiquito, he also had a series of spy
yes.
spoofs too.
Yeah.
I think he and Dolphy's characters ran into each other in a couple of
there were
episodes.
a couple where they were teamed up.
And Dolphy often worked in the comedy team with a comedian named Panchito,
who you can see playing the Penguin in Alias Batman and Robin, the 1980s musical Filipino Batman film. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right.
Oh, yeah. Even after the 60s boom, like Dolphy still kept busy making movies and TV shows and radios, and they did spoofs through the 90s, where he even did a Titanic spoof in 1998. So he was still making stuff.
Did he play the Titanic?
I'm not sure what he played.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that film is new enough that it probably exists. So,
yes, you're probably right.
Yes. And there's a McKenna's Gold parody, which is...
That's weird.
That's the film I would not expect to have a parody, but it does. So
Yeah. I saw that. I saw the movie. I remember seeing that at a birthday party at a drive-in. It was the first time I ever saw a lady's naked butt on screen. So McKenna's Gold is very drilled into my mind, basically. Yeah. And also, Batman has been pretty ubiquitous in Filipino pulp, or I don't know what you want to call this kind of cinema, but there's, again, I think what we know of is only the tip of the iceberg. There's probably dozens and dozens of them. And I saw, Taurus, that you had mentioned a couple that on your site that I hadn't heard of, like this film Johnny Joker you had a post about.
There was a trio of Batwoman and Robin films starring Virginia, who's an action star. Her only film that appears to survive is called Revenge of Lady Fighter, which I reviewed, and it's actually pretty good. But she's Virginia Aristorinas, and her son is Robin Aristorinas, and they play Batwoman and Robin. And the first and third films is directed by June Aristorinas, also known as Junar. Yeah, and he's her husband and Robin's dad. So Batwoman and Robin is the first one, and then Batwoman and Robin Meet the Queen of the Vampires.
Right,
is the second one, and then the third one is Johnny Joker. And these came out in 72 and 73.
All right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, besides the posters and a couple of stills of Johnny Joker, that's all we know about them. Most of these films we only know about because they have posters that are still around, which means if there's Batman films that didn't even have posters, they're lost to history. Yeah.
I actually wanted to mention, Taurus, that the site you mentioned, Pellicula ATBP, has a post with a ton of stills from Batman Fights Dracula.
Oh, cool.
A lot, that
one's from 67, by the way.
Right, yeah. And that's like a holy grail for us, by the way.
That's not the Batman Fights Dracula cartoon movie from the 90s. This is the OG Batman Fights Dracula.
Yeah.
And as you can see, Batman and vampires are apparently mortal enemies because they fight each other in a lot of movies.
True, yeah.
Cross-cultural mortal enemies.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I liked in the Batman Fights Dracula pictures is Robin in Batman Fights Dracula dresses like Robin from the comics, except he wears a Batman cowl, which looks pretty weird, but it's an interesting interpretation. And then there's a Batman Fight, which I think is a straightforward Batman movie. It might be a parody, who knows. It's
got a cardboard box robot, but that really could mean anything.
Yeah, right. You could go either way with that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the film we mentioned earlier, Alias Batman and Robin, which is a sort of a comedic musical version of Batman and Robin, and all the songs are sort of based on, like, American 50s rock songs.
Yeah. And that stars Joey De Leon and his son Kempe De Leon.
Yeah.
So it's another family affair.
Yeah.
So.
And that's an interesting movie because it's not really about Batman and Robin. It's about two guys who pretend to be Batman and Robin. Mm-hmm. And then these villains who pretend to be Batman and villains start a crime wave in the city. And so, these guys who pretend, they even have their own Batmobile, so they have to like be Batman and Robin. It's kind of good.
Yeah, it's interesting how it works there's a theory in the Batman universe where the villains only show up in Gotham City because Batman's there, and this is this isn't a take on that, but it's interesting how it parallels with that theory.
Yeah, it dovetails with that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also, its namesake is a 1965 film called Alias Batman at Robin, which is the first Filipino Batman movie that I know about. And it's impossible to find anything on that one because it shares the name with Alias Batman and Robin. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's also, the Philippines have made other sort of masked Avenger movies. There's a character called Baron Gustavo, who's like a masked crime fighter, but it looks like sort of like a Zorro. It could be like a Zorro inspired figure as well, because it looks like it takes place in the in the 19th century. So, but anyway, there's that. So lots of Filipino Batman movies to look for and probably not find because they're even rotted.
Yeah, even not Batman, the Filipinos just has tons of independent comedic superhero movies throughout the years. Yeah. Even as late as a couple of years ago, Manny Pacquiao was in one. So.
What was that?
Pac-Man, I think it's called.
Oh, okay.
It did really bad at the box office.
Yeah. Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Too bad for Manny.
Yeah.
Batman. It should have been called Batmanny.
Yeah.
And then there's been a lot of in the last decade or so. There's been a lot of Filipino heroes. I think there was a new Elastic Man movie, and then what else? What are some of the other ones?
There's a Zaza Zaterna, which I think is one of Dolphy's girlfriends.
Oh, okay. And then what was that one? The Lightning Woman? I can't remember what that one was called. They came out in the early 2000s. I can't remember it. I shouldn't have brought it up, really. Electro Girl or something like that. Something along those lines. Maybe we should talk about James Batman, because we actually know pretty much about James Batman, and not so much about these others.
We could probably just do a whole podcast series on all the different Filipino superhero films, and probably we will someday in the future, but that's then and this is now.
Right, yeah. Yeah, we shouldn't project too far ahead. But it was a thing. I mean, after the major studios, most of them imploded, what came in to fill the space was all these little scrappy independent companies making these and a lot of what they did was these low budget sort of pop culture riff movies where they just take whatever was popular and sort of copy it or spoof it or whatever. So I sort of feel like James Batman is Sampaguita's attempt to sort of go with that flow. Anyway, we should probably talk about the movie a little bit. Do you want to handle part one of the synopsis, Tars?
Okay, so basically the UN is meeting like they normally do, and it turns out a rogue terrorist organization known as Claw is threatening a large portion of the countries that they should immediately surrender or else they're going to be destroyed. And the meeting itself is even crashed by a Claw agent who threatens that pretty much all of Asia and Europe has to surrender to communism and hate America, or else he's going to destroy the entire world.
Right, yeah. One of the preconditions is that they what's the word? They shall be taught hatred of America.
Yeah.
Was that your interpretation that was the United Nations? Because it was sort of obviously in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of Filipinos in the United Nations. But, yeah, I figured it was the Filipino United Nations or just the United Nations Philippines branch.
Yeah, I think
there
that's
is such a thing.
Either that, or it might be like some sort of like the Asian Pacific Alliance, essentially running the same thing. But it's like, they're crashed by a guy who's dressed up like Fu Manchu.
Totally. Yeah.
Who can shoot lasers from his hands and then disappears from the rest of the movie.
Yeah, he really does. And I like one of my favorite parts of the movie is his like sidekick, that like really old guy who looks like a priest, like all through the scene, because his speech to the United Filipino Nations is pretty long-winded, and the whole time he's delivering it, there's this really old guy standing next to him who looks really out of it. He looks like maybe it's like Grandpa got furloughed from the home, and so they just used him as an extra. But it's really weird because he just seems to be totally checked out, and there's all this melodrama going on around him. Anyway, that's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, and the old guy also does not reappear either after
No, he doesn't.
The Fu Manchu guy vanishes.
Yes.
Yeah, and the world is threatened, so of course they call in the obvious suspects, Batman and James Bond, instead of, any serious military or America or whatever, since America is directly threatened, or any government people from any nation. So
yes, the America is basically threatened with being hated by the Philippines, but I think the Philippines are pretty ambivalent about America as it is. I think that's part of the reason we have movies like this. It's sort of a way of them working out their sort of conflicted feelings about America.
Yeah. I did find it interesting that they threaten America, but not the Philippines specifically. So
the Philippines is never mentioned. So basically, I guess this movie is supposed to take place in some kind of comic book universe. So and then we find so the only people for the job are Batman and James Bond, who don't like each other.
No.
And both played by Dolphy. In Batman, Dolphy in a really baggy looking Batman uniform with what the hell on his chest emblem, Tars? Do you know what that was?
I think it was like a dancing stage girl with a sash, but I'm not 100% sure because it looked like that.
It looked a little bit like a chorus girl.
Yeah. So
a buxom chorus girl, or sort of a Hottentot Venus figure. But it was very strange. As a silhouette, it kind of reminds me of like those naked lady silhouettes that truck drivers have on their mud flaps.
Yeah.
But this is what he has on his chest in place of a bat, which seems a little strange because they're already calling him Batman. So I don't know why they're trying to.
Yeah, maybe it's a logo of something that we just don't get.
Right, it may be something that's just sort of that only Filipinos would understand, sort of pop culture, or some kind of product label or something like that. But anyway, it was a source of. There was one scene where you could see it pretty clearly, and I froze the video and like stared at it, and I got that it's definitely a woman figure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, maybe they're a sponsor of the movie or something.
Right. Yeah.
There's a really cheap Indian Spider-Man spoof movie, and it's sponsored by a milk company, so he wears the milk company logo. So maybe it's like that.
Right. Yes. Maybe it's like some kind of noodle company or something like that.
It's the nightclub where the scenes were filmed for the evil base or something.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the evil base, there's a guy named Drago, who is the leader of Claw, I guess. And he looked like a particular Marvel supervillain, but I couldn't remember if it was like Mole Man or something like that. But he definitely has that kind of look. He wears like a metal skull cap and a hood.
Yeah, he sort of looked like Dr. Doom, except they left his face open.
Yeah.
I was confused whether he was a cyborg or not. But it looks like it's just a metal hat with a chin guard.
Yeah, and then he has as his henchman the Penguin, and played by a pretty big guy. And it's curious to me why the Penguin is like the go-to Batman villain. You know, like the show Gotham is like, you know, it's all about the Penguin. They couldn't even keep the Joker alive for 2 episodes. So anyway, there's a big guy, a very hypertrophic version of the Penguin, and then there's a dude who wears sunglasses who has a spiked ball for a hand. And then there's some women who are dressed like the Black Rose from the Choi Yen movie Black Rose, which was interesting. And one of them is called Black Rose, but she's not dressed like that.
No, she actually, her mask actually is a cat mask, so...
Yes. Yeah.
So she's actually like a cross between Black Rose and Catwoman, so...
Yeah, that's true. I guess she is supposed to be the Catwoman.
I would guess that maybe she's Black Rose because... I don't know. She's played by Bella Flores. Doesn't Flores mean flower? Or am I?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so maybe that's a pun on her name or something.
Yeah. Oh, and another one of my favorite bits, and this is only because my wife translated it, but it has that classic superhero movie trope where Batman's alter ego, who is not Bruce Wayne, his name is Dolpho, who is, of course, Dolphy, is in love with the daughter of the chairman of the United Nations, whose name is Shirley, played by Shirley Moreno, who was a new ingenue at Sampaguita at that time. And so he's in love with her, and she, of course, won't give him the time of day, but of course is totally in love with Batman. You know, so there's that sort of Lois Lane Clark Kent dynamic going on. And there's a really funny scene where, you know, her sister, who's Delia, who is also Bella Flores, because it turns out she is, spoiler alert, that she is the Black Rose, but she's castigating her for her crush on Batman, and she's saying she should marry a man with money like Dolphy, and she doesn't like Dolphy, and then Dolphy shows up and tries to woo her, and she's visibly shrinking away from him, and then at one point she says to her dad, "Papa," where is it? "Papa, Panget," which means, my wife told me, "Papa, he's ugly."
Wow. Yeah. It's also during these scenes where Dolphy's badly trying to hit on her, the Robin character is spending all his time laughing at everything he does too, which is also
right.
funny.
Yeah, Batman and Robin have a very antagonistic relationship in this movie, and And Dolpho / Batman is often punching Robin in the face or slapping him and stuff like that and calling him an idiot. So on the version you watched, Tars, was he called Reuben or was he called Robin?
I think it was Reuben, although it might be, you know, they just...
Yeah.
However you want to interpret it, I think.
Right,
yeah. You can't really hear it good enough.
Yeah, the first time I watched this, it was an unsubtitled version, but someone had given me a printout of the English, the translated dialogue, and in that it said Reuben, but again, it seems like there's no real reason to call him Reuben because his costume is exactly identical to the Robin of the comics and the TV show. But I think that the Mad Magazine parody from the 50s, he was called Reuben, so maybe that's a character. Carry over from that.
Reuben is his secret identity name.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. They don't really say what his name is, if his name is Dick. Yeah. And then there's a really good scene, like when they're Batman and Robin are first introduced, where they enjoy a meal together. And if you want to see a movie where Batman and Robin eat rice with their hands and bicker with each other, this is the movie for you. Yeah. And Robin, like, very laboriously, like, Batman complains that the food isn't flavorful enough, and Robin very laboriously goes to the lab and makes this concoction and puts it on the food, and Batman's like, "This is vinegar. You could have just gone to the store," and slaps him, and then he wipes his hand on Robin's cape, which also.
Yeah. Yeah, eat your heart out, Batman v Superman.
Yeah, this is this is a movie to see if you're like just can't wait to see Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
Superman's not in it, but
no, with all the stuff they threw in, it's sort of surprising, but
yes, this is true.
Yeah. So like the James Bond character, a lot of the times in the film gets saved by a woman character who her name might be Jenna, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I think it was. I think I heard Jenna too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought maybe she was supposed to be like. I guess she's this Bond girl, or I thought at first she was supposed to be like Ms. Moneypenny or something. But yeah, she keeps showing up, and isn't given much of an introduction. She's just kind of there, but plays a big part in the action. You know?
Yeah, she's pretty competent with the action choreography. So
yeah. One thing that's really striking about this movie is how about 2/3 in the way of the way in, it completely stops being a comedy, and it just becomes this very violent, super melodramatic. It becomes pretty serious. Mm-hmm. And obviously. And this is true of a lot of Dolphy's spy movies too. I think in the interest of pleasing everybody, they also function, as well as being these kind of madcap comedies, they also function as straightforward action movies. Like the action scenes in this movie aren't really slapstick. They're pretty straightforward fight scenes, and a lot of them go on for quite a while. Yeah. And I think that's because, well, hey, it's James Bond and Batman, and even though it's silly, you want to see them fight. And then you get to see James Bond fight the Penguin, which where else are you going to see that? You're not going to see that in Batman versus Superman, people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there.
Yeah. So the actually, like, if you just like competent action scenes with a '60s flavor, these are pretty well done in that department, and like most characters have multiple scenes where they're fighting one or more other characters too. So it's not like certain characters, like some of these films have characters, the comedic characters just sit out. Here it's like everybody fights. Everybody's
in the fight. Another thing about this movie is that there's some really interesting camera work. I forget the name of the cinematographer, but there's a lot of almost new wave style camera compositions, a lot of deep focus shot where you have something, some object in the foreground, which you're sort of, that creates an aperture that you're looking through. I mean, it's a very visually interesting movie. I mean, it's, so definitely things to recommend it.
It'll have like scenes where it shoots through people's legs, and then they frame the action around that. And or they'll have the static shot and they build everything around it, and so like some of the scenes they're neatly composed. Yeah, so it's not some of these films they just set up the camera and let dumb things happen. This one they were pretty active, so it was pretty.
The camera is definitely, it's very fluid camera work, very creative. Let me look and see if I mentioned the name of the cinematographer in my Teleport City review. Let's see. Amaury Agra was the Amaury Agra, Agra. So look him up on the IMDb.
Is there like a Filipino version of an internet database, like how like Hong Kong? There's the Hong Kong movie database. And there's a Thai one for Thai movies.
Yeah, and there's an
an
Egyptian one too.
Yeah, I don't know.
There should be. If there isn't, there should be. There's definitely a good few sites dedicated to these older sort of Filipino pulp and B movies. The one you found, the Pelikula ATBP, is that's a gold mine. It has tons of. There's also what's that one?
Video 48.
Video 48. Yeah.
He just puts tons and tons of posters up, and he's still like 4 or 5 years on. He's still putting up stuff like almost every day.
Yeah. So while a lot of these movies didn't survive, it's kind of like Mexico, where you have these movies that are lost, but there's just tons of lobby cards, tons of posters. And the same thing, Philippines, there's just a lot of posters, like for these Batman movies. Pretty much every one of the ones we mentioned, you can find posters and even stills for them, which in a way makes it kind of even more painful because they look so fun.
Yeah.
But that's kind of our beat, ours, isn't it?
It's been having to deal with that for over a decade now, and it's to the point where I don't expect to see any of these movies. That way, when the occasional one shows up out of nowhere, it becomes a huge surprise.
Yes,
it's a good positive experience, like when some of the Turkish films popped up about 3 or 4 years ago. So you never know what somebody will have on a tape stored away somewhere. And there's rumors that some of these films might exist somewhere, just stored on tapes, just not taken care of.
Right.
So,
well, I think a lot of the ones that have survived have been like TV broadcast copies, like videotapes that were in some Filipino TV station's library. Unfortunately, one of the biggest stations in Manila was burned during the People Power demonstrations, and I think a lot, or at least Andrew Levold was telling me that a lot of films in their library were burned in that instance. So and
then some of the other studios had like fault fires earlier, like this studio that they lost a lot of their films in a fire, and then they were saved with the Roberta film. So, a lot of their older stuff is just gone.
Yeah, but the experience that what's been happening with the Turkish films gives cause for hope, because this was kind of like what when even before Own Our Films came around. I think there was just a Three Devadam and a couple of these Turkish pulp films kicking around, and the word was that everything else was lost. And then Onar came around and started putting out more and more films, and then they started popping up on YouTube, and now there's like a ton of these old Turkish films out there. So you never know. Yeah. There's always cause for hope. Yeah. And when hope runs out, you can always think about something else rather than weird cult movies. So maybe hopefully we'll be talking about Batman Fights Dracula, because that's one of my big obsessions ever since I heard about that movie. And I know it's going to be terrible if I ever get a chance to see it. I'll be completely disappointed, but that's not really what it's all about.
No, it's the search.
Yes.
So it's like if I look at my giant stack of movies I track down, it's more fun to track them down than it is to watch them a lot of the time. So.
Yes, indeed.
Even then, I don't have time to watch them half the time. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like Bruce Lee versus Gay Power being a key example.
Yeah.
Like a film that just could not live up to its reputation or its title.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing about the movie I wanted to point out is it seems to have a lot of they sort of talk around the fact that Claw, sort of like in the Indian movies when they're really talking about Pakistan, but they sort of beat around the bush. Mm-hmm. It seems like the Claw is like they keep saying that you have to submit to the red. Is it the red government? It's the red something.
Yeah, I think the red government. I think. Yeah. Yeah,
the red government, and then at one point, one of the characters who is turned over to Claw says, I've embraced communism. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely an anti-communist streak through the movie too.
Yeah.
So it's political.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just part of the weird thing of the movie is like, they're threatening to destroy the world in 5 days, and then, Batman and James Bond spend a lot of the time just futzing around, not really doing anything.
Yeah, it's there's the threat, and then Batman and James Bond are brought in, and they bicker at first. I mean, There's actually a lot of pretty funny scenes. I thought the scene where Batman and James Bond are sort of like, dickering with the United Nations, like they're like, pick me. They're fighting, they're like arguing who should get the job. But once they get the job, this is like a series of comic vignettes. James Bond goes to the beach and gets bitten on the bare ass by a rubber centipede. Batman has all kinds of, he tries to woo Shirley, and Robin mocks him cruelly and gets slapped. There's a lot of that stuff. But then it really kicks into gear in the last half hour. They get down to business, and it's just fights. People shooting laser beams out of their hands, and there's like a giant hand in the claw hideout that shoots lasers and disintegrates people. So the last bit is some kind of active industrial building with all this really, really nasty looking machinery. It looks like it might be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts and no
like
safety equipment.
No, of course not.
Yeah, there's also in the last bit, there's a random spy character in the Claw organization who helps the heroes out, who just shows up out of nowhere.
Yeah, he's an undercover agent, and both of us thought he looked like somebody. Like, I think it was a cameo by some, leading man from elsewhere in Filipino cinema, but we could not figure out who he was. So apologies for that, but maybe someone who sees the movie will know who he is and will let us know.
Yeah, because they hide his face at first too, and then it's like a reveal when they see who he is. But
and he's very movie star handsome. It's like if he's not a big star, he should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. He becomes big enough that he actually fights the goon with that hand with a club.
That's right.
I think they call him Joker at some point, although he doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't really fit that slot. Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I think it's. I'm very fond of it. I think it's pretty funny. I actually thought it was funnier when I watched it yesterday than when I first saw it. Mm-hmm. Maybe because I watched it with my wife and we were both kind of laughing at it.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just such a funny concept that it's like it's really one of those, as we go through this, we talk about these films and we watch more and more of them. What at first seems strange doesn't seem so strange. You see things that you first think are like, so WTF and like so unique, and then you see, oh, well, there's a bunch of movies that have this. Yeah. James Batman, pretty unique, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a good introduction film. Like if you just want to get into the world of pop cinema, this is like probably one of the best 10 starting films, because it's got a lot of neat stuff you won't see anywhere else. It has an English subtitle version. It's got enough Western influences that you won't be bored. It's got enough action that you're not going to spend half the movie fast forwarding. It's got pretty much most of what you want, and
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, because I've mentioned it to a couple of people who want to get into like more obscure stuff. That's like a good starting point.
Right. Yeah, I'd say that and like Three Devedam which is the Turkish movie where Captain America and Santo fight an evil Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's just the sort of real one of a kind.
Yeah.
Three
Devedam is the prequel to Civil War.
Yeah. Yeah, they should I'd love to see a Marvel remake of Three Devedam.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to see, more about Santo's tortured past,
Yeah.
and all his self-doubts. So, I don't know, anything else to say about James Batman?
Let's see, I think, besides, what we mentioned, it's pretty good. It's a movie, it's called James Batman, it has James Bond and Batman. You want to see it, so track it down.
Yeah, right. You want to see it, so stop pretending.
Yeah. You're not better than this.
Right, yeah, you're not better than us, so just, admit it to yourself. Yeah, track it. It's easy to find.
Yeah.
So, get it, see it. We won't judge you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can't guarantee that other people won't judge you, but, screw them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. I'm sure this will be archived, so I'll mention it anyway. I just recorded an episode of the Projection Booth podcast with Mike White, and also Beth Watkins from Beth Loves Bollywood, a great friend of mine, was involved, and we discussed the movie Sholay, which is like a classic of Bollywood cinema. So I talked about Sholay, and of course I talked about my book, Funky Bollywood, and that's going up on February 16th. Or February 17th. So it should be available by the time this airs. And it was a very lively, fun discussion. So
sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Until next time.
Until next time in next genre. This is the Infernal Brains signing off.
Thanks, everybody.